MicroStrategy yesterday released earnings, and they just beat on everything. They're killing the game, absolutely destroying the game. And Michael Saylor, as you can see here, is the ultimate Bitcoin bull. He's got laser eyes. He's going to the moon. He went on CNBC this morning, and he literally was talking about Bitcoin as digital real estate. He even said you could take it to the grave with you. I mean, he is a believer. And what's fascinating is that they now have over 105,000 Bitcoin. Over 105,000 Bitcoin are on the MicroStrategy balance sheet. And so an exact quote was, "We continue to be pleased by the results of the implementation of our digital asset strategy. Our latest capital raise allowed us to expand our digital holdings, which now exceed 105,000 Bitcoins. Going forward, we intend to continue to deploy additional capital into our digital asset strategy." Michael Saylor bought the dip, and Michael Saylor's not going to stop. I mean, how many Bitcoin do we think that he's going to end up acquiring before it's all over? He's at 105,000. How many could he get?
He ain't getting 21 million because he ain't taking mine.
Michael, love you. You ain't getting mine either. John?
You ain't getting mine. I thought that was known.
All right, so he's got 105,000 now. If we look at the Bitcoin treasury as a percentage of market cap, we've got a chart here that's pretty interesting in terms of showing the initial purchase back in August of 2020. You can see that the Bitcoin treasury at one point was 100% of the market cap. It now is oscillating, big SAT word there. You guys see that one? You guys probably couldn't spell that word. Oscillating around 60 to 70%. The fact that you didn't try to spell it means neither one of you can spell
I was going to
word.
make a joke about you, but I
Go ahead. What was the
myself.
joke? No, go ahead. You can get a shot at me.
It was just going to be a small joke about how you learned that word last night, but...
Well, I've known that word for a while. I didn't do well on the SAT. I'm more of an ACT guy, right, John?
Yeah.
Yeah, John and I are ACT guys.
So he says. I'm an ACT guy for sure.
That's the one where, like, if you don't really do well in the SAT, you're like...
You take it, and then you're like, oh, but look at what I did on this one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think John
scale.
and I got like 33s on the ACT. We were killing the game.
I did all
I
right.
probably got 34 then.
Yeah. The lower the score, the better.
No.
All right. So with MicroStrategy, basically they're oscillating, SAT word, between 60-70% of the market cap. And then if you go and you actually look at the MicroStrategy versus Bitcoin versus NASDAQ, you can see it gets very interesting when you start to actually compare. MicroStrategy has been outperforming Bitcoin and obviously the NASDAQ. Bitcoin has drastically outperformed NASDAQ. Bitcoin's over 200% since August of 2020 when MicroStrategy first bought Bitcoin. But MicroStrategy stock is up almost 400%. Obviously, they have their business intelligence software side of the business, which is just as kind of value accretive as their actual Bitcoin purchases. And so you can see when MicroStrategy is outperforming Bitcoin like that, and the NASDAQ is so drastically underperforming the price of Bitcoin, it leads you to ask, should every company just buy Bitcoin? Should they all put it on their balance sheet? And so there's a website called bitcointreasuries.net, which at NVK on Twitter has put together. And we just pulled the top companies. These are the top publicly traded companies ranked by ownership of Bitcoin. And what you can see is MacroStrategy, which is a subsidiary of MicroStrategy. Real big naming convention there. MacroStrategy LLC, which is MicroStrategy, currently has a $6 billion market cap. It was about $1 billion last July and August. So at $6 billion, 66% Bitcoin in terms of holdings there. And they currently have over 105,000 Bitcoin, which is about half of 1% of this 21 million supply. So if you look on the far right of this chart, you can see they own about 0.5% of all 21 million Bitcoin, which when you think about the fact that they have 105,000 Bitcoin, that sounds like a massive number. It's only 0.5% of the total outstanding 21 million. The cost basis for that Bitcoin is around $2.7 billion, and today's value is over $4 billion. So they're up 1.5x on that. If you go down and you look at Tesla or you look at Square, you can start to see that Tesla and Square both have spent $1.5 billion for Tesla. Square spent $220 million, and both of them are up 1.13 and 1.4x. But their ownership of the 21 million outstanding Bitcoin is much, much lower, 0.2 and then 0.03 or 0.04%. And so when you look at those three, those are the three kind of non-Bitcoin businesses that hold it on their balance sheet. They're not involved in the crypto or Bitcoin business. Square has Cash App, which has some Bitcoin exposure, but for the most part, they're not in the actual industry. The other companies on this list, they are in the industry. And so, again, if we go back to the chart of MicroStrategy versus Bitcoin versus NASDAQ, it begs the question, Joe and John, should every company in the public markets put some Bitcoin on their balance sheet? Like, is that at this point a no-brainer strategy?
If they're smart.
Only if they're smart.
Well, I mean, it's worked for MicroStrategy, obviously. I think it depends. But yeah, look, I don't think there's any reason why you can't hold 1 to 2% of the cash on your balance sheet in Bitcoin.
And why 1 to 2%? Obviously, MicroStrategy's chosen to go 90%, 60, 70%
so his
of the
conviction
market
is much
cap.
higher than I think the normal person would be, obviously.
Tesla is mid-single digits of their cash on hand.
Yeah.
And then I think that Square was somewhere in the like 1 to 3% or something.
I think it offers that asymmetric upside, right, without that kind of, with limited downside protection. So if you only do 2%, at worst, you lose 2%. It's not going to zero, right? So you still protect yourself on the downside, but you have that asymmetric upside that MicroStrategy has obviously captured over the last year.
It's companies doing cocktail insurance.
There's definitely a conversation component to it, right? When Tesla bought Bitcoin and put it on the balance sheet, it was very obvious that the mainstream media started to ask CFOs and CEOs when they would be interviewed, are you thinking about doing this? So it definitely changed the conversation. But from a pure financial performance standpoint, yes, Bitcoin is volatile compared to just sitting with cash, but the cash is guaranteed to lose value. Right? If you've sat with cash on your balance sheet since the middle of last year, kind of 12 months ago to today, you actually have less purchasing power than not. Bitcoin during the same time frame has expanded the purchasing power that you have by 3 to 4x, depending on when you would have bought the Bitcoin, et cetera. And so over long periods of time, we heard Saifedean from yesterday say that over any 4-year period in Bitcoin's history, if you bought Bitcoin and held it for 4 years, you have more purchasing power 4 years later than you did when you first bought it.
Well, one thing that's interesting too is, and I'm not sure how we would quantify this, but there's got to be some increase in demand of the actual equity of his company also, right? Because of the institutional investors that want exposure to Bitcoin but could not buy Bitcoin historically, right? So say I work at a big institution, we're not allowed to physically go and buy the Bitcoin ourselves because of rules and regulations, whether it's internal or regulatory, and now they go and buy MicroStrategy stock to essentially get exposure to that.
It basically becomes either a tracking stock to some degree, right? Or it becomes like a proxy for an ETF. There is no ETF. Yeah. Now, I would argue that if people want just pure Bitcoin exposure, they could just go buy GBTC, right? Which is a publicly traded vehicle that gives you kind of indirect exposure to Bitcoin. But at the same time, then you're making the decision to actually buy Bitcoin, right? Like that is a allocation decision. When you're buying the equity of a business, you could probably pass it off internally as, oh, we're buying a business intelligence equity,
exactly.
Right? And then they just happen to have this massive, multi-billion-dollar position in Bitcoin on the balance sheet as well. It's very smart because also the business intelligence unit has beat estimates in Q2, I think, on both revenue and the bottom line, which is showing you that there's an actual business and stuff. Now you can argue is, how good is it? How fast will it grow? All that, but it's Bitcoin plus business intelligence ends up actually being a huge benefit here.
Can we talk about how much of a gangster Michael Saylor is? I was looking before the show, and his stock during the .com was at $3,100 per share, and you said it dropped to $1 per share.
I think it went to like less than $1.
That's insane.
Yeah,
and then 20 years later, now it's, it went back to kind of in the mid 100 to 200 range for a while, it seemed, and now it's up into the 600s.
Michael Saylor is one of the longest running CEOs of a publicly traded company.
Yeah.
He's been running this company for 20 years, right, in the public markets, and he's navigated multiple technology advancements, multiple kind of eras. So the .com bubble, the global financial crisis, the adoption of mobile, now crypto and Bitcoin, et cetera. Like he continues to survive and thrive. And I think that part of what is fascinating about him was until August of 2020, he was not into Bitcoin. Like
Yeah.
this is not somebody who saw it in 2014 and was like, oh, I love this, then bought a bunch personally and then like ended up making a bunch of money in kind of the value of their Bitcoin position and then did it with their business. He did not kind of buy into Bitcoin until August of 2020. And one of his best friends, Eric, was into Bitcoin. Was like trying to convince him for a while, right? And eventually got him to kind of see the light of day. He ended up doing a whole bunch of stuff around education, from reading books, listening to podcasts, etc. And it was like, bam, I got to do this. And then what's publicly known is not only did he take 85% of his balance sheet, which was a high conviction bet, and convert it to Bitcoin to start, he also personally bought hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin as well.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, he said, okay, I'm not just going to buy a bunch and stop there. Then he started to actually take on debt, whether it was, unsecured, secured, converts, all these different kind of interest rates, et cetera, and use that to get capital to buy more of it. So this is somebody who understands like pressing your winners is usually a pretty good investment strategy and has done a very unique strategy to kind of position themselves. I don't understand why every other public company doesn't go do this. This is like the most no-brainer thing in the world if you're a publicly traded business.
Well, one of the things that's even more impressive about that, right, is that he missed the boat on kind of some of the early returns that I think some people owned a Bitcoin and sold it, right? They thought it was already kind of, they capitalized and took some of the profit and stuff like that. He missed all of that. And instead of saying, hey, maybe I missed the boat, maybe this is kind of too late in the trade or whatever, he just doubled down super aggressively, right? He put personal capital, the business, he borrowed debt, all this kind of stuff. And to sit there and watch your stock go from $3,100 to a single dollar in the span of 2 years, and then to stay for 20 more years and have the conviction and the courage to do this is incredible, right? And I think it speaks to him as a leader, obviously. But one day we'll have to go through. I've heard some crazy stories about one time. I forget where I heard it, but he had a story about the website domains that he purchased and kind of some of the negotiating stories about it. We'll have to dig up the details and go through it one day. It was insane.
He sold voice.com to a crypto business for like $30 million.
Savage.
Yeah. He's a savage. And if I remember correctly, it was some story about like how he negotiated it all the way up.
They started out with like an offer of like $100K or something.
Yeah, it was something like that. And he was just like, no. And then they just had like unlimited money essentially, so they just paid him some ridiculous fee.
You know who else is going to have unlimited money?
Him.
Well, Michael Saylor and probably SoFi at some point.
Yeah.
SoFi.com/pop. No, but Michael Saylor stands to have one of the most valuable companies in the stock market if the Bitcoin perspective plays out, right? So it is a high conviction, in many people's eyes, high risk type strategy. I think if you asked myself or Michael or other people, they would argue that this isn't so high risk. But if it works, his $4 billion balance sheet could expand to be 40, 50, 60 billion. And all of a sudden, if he's got a 40, 50, 60 billion dollar balance sheet, I mean, what does a company trade? A company could trade at, hundreds of billions of dollars in market cap. Like is there a world where before the end of the decade, Michael Saylor has $1 trillion business with MicroStrategy?
Well, it depends on the price. It's at $6 billion right now, right?
If Bitcoin, let's just use other people's example of Bitcoin ends up hitting $1 million after the next halving, right? So within this decade, if that was to happen, that would mean that Michael Saylor has what on his balance sheet? 105,000 times $1 million. What is that number, John? I'm not a mathematician. I don't do public math. And if you ask me all the zeros and the commas and stuff, very, very confusing. I'm an ACT guy, not so much an SAT guy.
I love that quote. Don't do public math.
No public math going on here. That's why John's got a calculator.
So big, you got a little.
You know that's also another thing is when you got to do
what does
math.
The public math thing mean? Like you're just not willing to do it in front of people?
Yeah.
Okay, what's 105,000 times $1 million?
I'm asking if that's what the
Go ahead.
means.
What is it?
105 what?
105,000 times $1 million.
Trillion.
Wrong.
No, is that like a general rule though? Like if someone asks you,
I don't do public
what's
math.
4 times 2? You just say I don't do public math.
It starts to scale. Someone's like spell cat, and then next thing you know, they're like spell supercalifragilistic. You're just like, dude, you're like, I didn't want to get down this road. I shouldn't have even started.
Who asked you to spell cat and you say no?
And then it goes to supercal.
By the way, John, I love you, but that's spelling. This is math. Those are two different things. ACT guys.
ACT guys, same thing.
All right, that's fine. What is 105,000 times $1 million?
Wait, so let's be clear. I was right.
105 billion.
105 billion?
Yeah.
So if he had $105 billion, is that right?
Yeah.
Are we positive?
Trillion,
Okay.
right?
No. Oh, see, look, Joe's doing public math. He's saying isn't it a trillion?
Joe.
No, it's 105 billion. 105 billion dollars on his balance sheet. Do we think he'd be $1 trillion business?
105.
Right now, he's got a $4 billion
No.
balance sheet, and he's got $6 billion market cap, give or take.
Yeah,
but sentiment is down.
But the multiple would have to expand by 10.
Okay, you don't think that could happen? It'd actually be more like 8, but who's counting?
Yeah, and then he's going to get in the whole concept of telling everyone he changed the world and his business is worth 10 times. Yeah, sure, maybe. I mean, it's an equity market. Anything could happen.
Yeah, I mean, they literally have companies that are
Yeah.
pre-product, pre-revenue trading at 15
That's what I mean.
billion.
Anything could happen.
Yeah, all you got to do is tell people in,
Tell good
2027, wait till we tell you about our earnings that we're going to have.
Tell a good story.
All right, so Michael Saylor may have $1 trillion business on his hands. We'll see if Bitcoin hits $1 million. That's a possibility.
His business cost basis seems to be around 26K too, which is
The cost for
Bitcoin. Yeah, why Tesla sits around like 34,000.
Wait, how do you? Are we sure that's the right number? 26,000?
Yeah, give or take 1,000.
Okay, where are we getting that data from?
Literally using how much he owns and how much he paid for it,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
because he probably hasn't sold any.
Michael Saylor's not testing liquidity of the market like Tesla. I do not think that he is testing any liquidity. He also said that it was digital real estate, which I thought was a very interesting perspective, because it is digital real estate to some degree, right? There's 21 million plots of land, if you will, on the Bitcoin network, and if you own one, you're a digital real estate owner.
Also said you could take it to the grave.
You know,
Bury me with my
he's
legend.
probably not wrong, but some people may not agree with that.